Dr. John Vile from MTSU, a political science professor there, also the dean of the department. Dr. Vile, thanks again for being with us. We're talking about the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about Ukraine President Zelensky. He has really become a central figure, as you would expect, in this invasion, but really an unconventional one, an unconventional president. What's your take on what we're seeing?
Well, you know, it shows maybe that democracy works. I mean, here's a man who made his career apparently on television as a school teacher. And apparently toward the end of the episodes, he ended up being elected as president of the country. And sure enough, life is now imitating art. He seems to have his finger on the pulse. I think one of the most dramatic, you know, we have Nathan Hale. You know, I regret that I have one life to give for my country. And Zelensky, so far, you know, his statement that, you know, when apparently the United States offered him a way out, he said, I don't need transportation, I need armaments. I'm planning to stay and fight. I mean, that it reminds me a little bit of Lexington and Concord, you know, where you're up against the biggest empire in the world, and they have all these troops, and they're walking down the road in their uniforms, and all of a sudden farmers start shooting from behind the trees. And you know, whether that will ultimately be effective against, you know, scores of tanks, I don't know. But I would prophesy, if I may, that, you know, if Russia tries to, they'll probably just try to install somebody in there and leave. But if they try to continue to occupy the territory, they're going to find it even much harder than they did in Afghanistan, where eventually, maybe like us, they ended up having to, you know, leave with their tail between their legs.
Right. I'm going to ask you to keep out that crystal ball just a little bit, even though I know it's a bit unrealistic. But when we talk of wars of late, I mean, we were in Afghanistan for 20 years. So I think that people are looking at this like, is this going to go on a couple of weeks, or are we talking years here?
I just don't know. I mean, no, I'm much better at predicting the past than I am the future. It gets me in trouble a lot less. But I mean, I think it's probably more likely that if Russia gains the upper hand now, that they would simply try to replace the government and basically move their troops out of sight. I think the longer they keep troops visibly in a nation that doesn't want them, they're going to get picked off one by one. You know, I think they are going to face situations similar to what they did in Afghanistan.
President Zelensky is asked to immediately join the European Union. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think it's going to happen at this point. If it did, I mean, the beauty of the situation now, and it's an ugly one, and I like many of our callers, I'm deeply concerned about the people there, but the beauty of it is that it is not directly pitting the world's two most powerful nuclear powers directly against one another. And, you know, even if we were to enter with a very limited objective, wars tend, you know, they talk about the fog of war, and, you know, wars tend to come with a lot of unexpected things. And all it would take would be, you know, shooting down a couple Russian planes and they shooting us, and before you know it, we could be, not likely we're in a third world war, but you know, if you remember, like I do, World War I, you know, at the start of World War I, nobody ever thought, most of them didn't think it was going to start as a world war.
Right.
But each country started lining up troops in response to what the others might do, and you know, the powder keg goes off, and it lasts for, you know, however many years that it lasted. So hopefully we're not in that situation.
You know, but I think it is a real fear. As I was talking to a Ukrainian woman today, she said, I didn't think he would do this, referring to Putin. I mean, she really believed he would not go this far. And so then she said, now he's threatening nuclear action. And the fear was very real. And I think that's where a lot of people are like, is he crazy enough to do it? And we just don't know.
Right. I think the answer is no. I mean, he seems to be a rational actor. I think the thing that is most concerning right now are these pictures that you see with him at one end of the table and, you know, Macron 20 feet away or his advisors 30 feet away. You know, Stalin, which is a somewhat different situation, but when Stalin was in power in Russia, Soviet Union, he became increasingly paranoid, and he would, you know, the closer you got to him, the more likely he was to suspect you and all kinds, you know, he starved millions of Ukrainians in the belief that they were opposed to him. And, you know, there's always a danger when a politician gets this isolated. And of course, he's not, you know, he's not accountable to the people in the way that Zelensky or Biden or Trump or, you know, the officials elected in democratic nations are. So it's a concern.
One of our, excuse me, one of our callers brought up earlier about how there has been turmoil in this region, especially between Russia and Ukraine and parts of it for a really long time. We're talking years now. But now the world's attention, including the media's attention, is on this because the stakes have been raised substantially just in the last few days. So rightly so. But what does that mean for the next few months in America as we head towards elections? What do you expect the dialogue to be around it?
Well, here's where I think Biden was right. Had we gone in with troops, I don't think we would have even the support that Putin seems to have in Russia, and it doesn't seem to be that strong. I just don't, you know, especially after having, you know, left Afghanistan in such a chaotic fashion, I don't think there's much desire, you know, I just don't think people would stand for that. But do people sympathize with the Ukrainian people? Yes. Do a lot of them, when they see it, do they think of early American patriots who were willing to defend themselves? And, you know, that's ultimately what this is going to come down to. Are the Ukrainian people going to be able to offer stiff enough resistance that Russia is going to turn back? And, you know, my hope is that they are.
This will affect us here in America. It already is. We look at gas prices, the fear of food prices going up even further as Ukraine is a big exporter of wheat. So we will feel the effects of what is happening there. We already are.
Well, and of course, the Russians, I saw a story today claiming that the ruble is now worth a penny. Right. That's their dollar. You know, if you can imagine, it's lost at least 20-30% just since this war has started. If, you know, we're complaining about 7 and 8%, rightly, you know, price increases over the last year. But imagine going into the supermarket next week or, you know, or this week and finding 20-30% price increases across the board. So, you know, a lot of people are going, you know, the Ukrainian people are feeling pain. The Russian people are feeling pain. And yes, we're going to probably feel some as well. Yeah, it's such an interesting dynamic that Russia is invading this other country, but the Russian people are suffering quite greatly as well, especially when it comes to the ruble. And the woman I was talking to today said, you know, she said back home, she said, you know, Russia and Ukraine, you have family in both. Most people have family in both. It's kind of like Kentucky and Tennessee, or, you know, something like that, you know, on a greater scale. North and South Korea. Yes. North and South Vietnam. I mean, this is what wars do. They're not pretty. No, definitely dividing us. We have just 2 minutes left. I just wanted to leave you with ask you to leave us with some last thoughts of yours as you look at this as a political science professor. What do you think about? Well, again, I mean, I think we take for granted sometimes our security. You know, we're not quite as safe. You know, they used to be. We were separated from Europe by oceans. Well, with nuclear missiles, nobody's completely isolated from anybody else anymore. But we do have some real geopolitical advantages here. You know, we are, you know, despite the disputes that we have between Democrats and Republicans, I think the nation is large. You know, some people are going to blame Biden and some people are going to blame Trump, but I don't think anybody thinks that we ought to be, or very few people I know want to support Putin in this. They think that we're on the right side. You know, whether we should send troops or send aid or what we should do is different, but we have a lot to be grateful for as American people. That's exactly right. Dr. Vile, thank you for spending the past hour with us. I've really appreciated this conversation. My pleasure. All right, and we're going to come back and I'll tell you what's in store for the rest of the week, so stay with us.